I'm like an old goat when it comes to AI. And what we do basically is we use, as you said, computer vision to automate things in manufacturing. We also work with robot to sort papers, right, to ice cream manufacturing. There's never a dull moment.
How did you get your first client?
There's electricity, there's internet, and then there's Gen AI, and it's going to eat electricity for breakfast. What if we thought a large language model or a specialist model and a lot of these domains, and then it assists you in asking the right questions? Hey, do we really need to hire a marketing team? No better time to be sort of an entrepreneur in AI than today.
Welcome to the second episode of Fireside Chat with 100x. And today we have Raghav Kashyap with us, who is the CEO and founder of Qualitas Technologies, which is automating manufacturing processes using computer vision from last 12 years. So let's get started.
To briefly introduce myself, I started Qualitas a dozen years ago, and then I have interestingly enough, I'm like an old goat when it comes to AI. So I did my master's in AI, and what we do basically is we use, as you said, computer vision to automate things in manufacturing. And so when you talk about manufacturing today, I think manufacturing employs the most number of people, right? And there's agriculture, there's manufacturing, and there's services industries comes close, but when it comes to a sector, manufacturing has a lot of people. And if you look at it, they're really doing one of two things. They're either using their hands and legs and moving things and assembling things, or pressing things with their fingers and hands, or they're using their cognitive skills. Now, so while their hands are being replaced, humans aren't really hands. Motor skills aren't our strengths, right? So we can easily be replaced by any kind of robot. But it's the cognitive skills that are really the strength of humans. So manufacturing has primarily now evolved from using labor to using more of your eyes and brains. But with AI, that was also going to be replaceable, right? And that's kind of the thesis that we entered the sector with, and started using deep learning, maybe back in 2005, 8 years ago. We looked at the first deep learning stack. Cafe Berkeley was the first open source deep learning stack that we used. Had about a layer of about 50 network deep. That was deep learning. Today it's not even close to anything that we have. And then sort of evolved over all the different frameworks, and then so today we're kind of using mostly state of the art models, and then solving applications like quality control, any kind of process automation. So things on the assembly line, which are high speed, high velocity, or complex in sort of visual cognitive skills, right? And then we work across industries: automotive, electronics, consumer goods, food and agriculture. So yeah, LPG, energy. So just like Gen AI today can be applied pretty much anywhere, computer vision in manufacturing can be applied in any use case where a human is taking decisions using.
So how did you started entire thing? What was the inflection point in your career journey when you realized, okay, now I think it's the right time for me to start working on Qualitas?
Personally, actually, it was more of the safety net that I needed. So when you go to the US, I think people, they struggle really hard to get this green card, right? And so I think today the extension of how long it takes to get a green card is now in decades. I think it's lifetimes, not even decades. So I think I had managed to get it when I joined Microsoft. And then it was like, I was not willing to give it up to move back to India. So I said, okay, let me wait until I'm close enough to become a US citizen.
Okay.
And that really was the inflection point to move back. So there's no epiphany or a eureka moment. It was like, okay, if shit hits the roof, then I can bail my ass back to the US and get a job. So that's when I came close to, so there's this, you have to stay in the US for 3 years, and then you're eligible for a citizenship.
Oh, interesting.
So that was...
and then when you came...
After I came back, I never went back for the next 10 years. So
but you still
never had to use the ejection chute.
Oh, but you still have the green card?
No, I have a passport. I'm a US citizen. Yeah. So I don't need to.
So again, just to focus a little bit more on the inception of the Qualitas, how was the journey in the beginning? Are you the alone, solo founder there, or you had a team there? So how was that happened?
I was a sole founder, started very traditional bootstrap, still bootstrap. And I think we were probably the only company when we started who had production level deployments as a bootstrapped company, because everyone else who came later had some form of funding or the other. But I think we've been managing just fine, and that's one of the strengths. So we were always lean from the very beginning. So right from using, of course, engineering talent, resources, who we hire, working with consultants. So it's leanness has always been in our DNA, right? And so that's how we kind of moved ahead. And I think we were also focused only on the Indian market. And in India and manufacturing, the market forces you to be lean because nobody pays for experiments, and especially in manufacturing. You're talking about razor thin margins, right? And so nobody wants to spend, lakhs on a piece of capital equipment, which you need to deploy and write off over the course of the years. So I think as part of that, we just figure out how do we use open source, how do we partner with people, and I think that's kind of been how our journey is. And our initial entry was in printing, so we did inspection for high security printing, like security
that was
papers.
your first project?
That's our first projects, right? So we worked with a security printer, checkbook inspection. Then there's these security labels that go onto these alcohol things. There's little labels, they're called security labels, and so checking that in a high speed. So we did that. Then we did some automotive projects, mostly being customized, right? And then we saw over the time that every industrial application, whether it is in printing or food, had some common elements when it came to what an AI or computer vision workflow looked like. And then so we built our first, what we call pipelines today, like DL workflows, DL pipelines. Right? And we built that for computer vision using rule-based systems. You collect data, you label it, you train it, and then you build, you test it, you deploy it, and then you grade and fine tune. And then so what slowly sort of started as different individual modules came together as a toolkit. And so today we use that platform called Eagle Eye, and we build applications that use that platform to customize solutions for various use cases. So one of the things we're looking to do now is to actually monetize this platform. So maybe use that as sort of the primary product that we can.
So is it more like a visual, you can say a visual inspection tool?
Yeah, it's a visual inspection tool that it's if people have heard of RoboFlow, Landing.ai, and things like that. It's more focused on manufacturing use cases. The only thing is it also has an edge component. So we use the training component, which is it can be either hosted on the cloud or on a standalone server, and there's an edge component which is inferencing. So there's a training and management, and then there's the inferencing piece. So they both sort of talk to each other.
Interesting.
So that's today's state of the art when it comes to what Qualitas is.
So like I can ask you, how many people are there in your company right now?
Yeah, so we've always been lean. So we've got about 20
how
plus.
Started?
How
many you started this?
Oh, how many we started? So when we started, I think we had like 4 or 5. I started, doing programming on the side when I was working in Microsoft. So then grew to an extent where, the consulting income sort of outgrew my actual income from Microsoft itself. And that's when I thought, okay, this is time to sort of go full time. But we were always very lean, like I said, right? So we used consultants. Before Upwork, it was called Odesk. It started as Odesk. And so, the founder of Odesk was sort of known to me. And then we hired a few people in Odesk and started. And so even though we were full-time people were few, we had sort of this ecosystem to lean on when we needed help. Okay. I think today that's really the norm than the exception, right? But that is how I think we've always leaned on cost-effective ways in getting things done. So then, so today also we've been fairly lean, 25 people, about 5 engineers, but we use many people outside the ecosystem.
But that's very commendable, because I was looking at the website, and you guys can also check, this is Qualitas.com, right?
Yeah.
So like this, like number of case studies, like, and the success stories I've been looking at the website, I was like very impressed by the work. And it's like very surprising to know that it's like a very lean team who has like executed all these things. So
yeah. So some exciting things, right? So we are one of the next week I go to Italy to one of the largest car manufacturing companies, and so I'm excited to see. Can't disclose it, but it's you would know it when it comes to supercars. So we're inspecting certain things there, and then we also work with robot to sort papers, right, to ice cream manufacturing. So the job is fun when you see cars to ice creams to papers. So there's never a dull moment, I would say. And so but we lean on our partners and consultants for a lot of the help.
One thing, so because we have an entrepreneurship track in the cohort, so a lot of people who join this cohort are planning to build something of their own. And this is a common question I'm receiving is how to get your first initial clients or customers, right, when you're starting something out, because you have very little experience as a business. So how did you get your first client? Can you basically share?
Yeah. So our first client, I think, came from how I got into industrial automation, really, but from Microsoft to industrial automation, right? The different worlds. But we had a family business that trades in industrial automation. So the idea started by just talking to customers, and I think that's what basics stays the same. It's customer first. You talk to customers before you start building product, really understand their pain, really understand what they need, compare it with status quo. What is the state of the art they're using today to solve the problem, evaluate the gaps and address the gaps, right? So it's just basics. And so I think we sort of did that. But it's much harder than it sounds. But exactly. That would be the formula I would subscribe to.
So actually, the same thing. Yeah, thanks for bringing this out, because we are in the second week. So a lot of people have done with their ideation, and now they are conducting user interviews. So that's the same advice basically which I was also mentioned to them. The more user interviews you will take, the more you can say, the better you understand about the problem statement.
Yeah, you can validate that much earlier. Absolutely.
And that's also the one way to attract your initial customers. Doctors.
Right.
So.
And the true validation is really will they pay, right, at the end of the day. So a lot of people will give you advice and they'll support you and they'll agree with you, but at the end of the day, will they actually pay is the question, and that's your true validation.
So we are using a book called Momtest. I'm not sure if you heard of this. So this is basically a very famous book. I think I forgot the name of the author, but it's popularized in a lot of these schools in SF as well, right? So basically talk about how you conduct user interviews without being, you can say, too delusional about the product, because most of the time when you ask a user, okay, will you pay for this or will you buy, they ask the more direct questions, right? So instead of first understanding whether the user is actually facing the problem statement or not, or how are they solving this. So it's basically just you can say a little bit guidebook to conduct user interviews. So,
that's very important. The right questions.
Right
sometimes.
Questions
I see a lot of founders that come back and say, but we did this survey and we got commendable, validation. And then what question did you ask? It's hey, what pain will you pay for this? How much will you pay? And then, but the question really needs to be on, okay, what is the pain? How will you use your product or service to address it? And then indirectly sort of probe to get that validation, right? So I think that's a good book. I'll take a look at it. Momtest. Okay.
Sure. So moving a little bit towards the generative AI segment, right? Which is, I think, a lot of people are interested here. So what do you think, first of all, about the Gen AI space right now, and how do you see yourself upskilling or maybe catching up with the thing, because I know everything is going at a very rapid pace.
Yeah. Oh, I'll tell you my first, so I hadn't heard of ChatGPT until a year and a half ago, right? At a friend of mine, and this was after almost when 4 was getting released. Oh no, 3.5 was getting released. I don't remember the exact date. And so until then, and this friend of mine, he's a founder of a large company, and he's like, "You're an AI and you've not heard of ChatGPT? What, are you living on a rock?" And that's when I literally Googled it, saw some videos, and it's like, okay, what's the big deal? What does it really do? And I think the first real moment came when I saw this complex conversation between two men, where they're trying to create content on something which was a very technical subject, and because all the earlier use cases were, write like Shakespeare, and or there was some really sort of weird examples that we were giving. But the one that really struck me is when you had this complex conversation between, and it remembered the previous question and contextually answered the next question. And then, it was, wow, this is really something, right? And I think that's when I just I watched YouTube nonstop. I was fighting with my son who was, wanting to watch his videos with and constantly watching sort of all the different use cases, what are the tools out there, and then playing around with different, and that's when it really sort of struck me as what it can do as in terms of potential. And then I quickly realized that the skill that enabled Gen AI is really now more about imagination than hard skills like technology or coding or anything else. It's just, how do you come up with problems to solve that can be solved using AI, which is pretty much now opened up a whole world of opportunities. And I think, as we were talking a little earlier, and then I quickly found myself really unable to catch up with the different things that were being thrown out there, because it was almost like you read about a new stable diffusion tool, Midjourney, and you played around with it, and then there's a new video editing tool, and then every day there were tools coming out, every day there were models coming out. And I realized this we can't just catch up, right? Otherwise you'll just be tasting a bit of it, but not really using it for anything else. And then slowly started to rethink a strategy about how Gen AI can help, because I think we're still in a very, very early stage of understanding what it can really do. And very few that I know have actually used it to sort of transform their existing business. If you're starting something new as a service-oriented business, or using it for maybe enhancing your workflow internally, that's great. But to really transform, I think very few in the at least traditional businesses like manufacturing or any other IT services have, at least from what I've little seen. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Yeah. So we started to we had to, the key was to identify, okay, how can it really help us? And for that we have to understand it, right? How do you use it? And so then I leaned back to the original tactics of working with freelancers and consultants, and had small mini projects that I posted on Upwork, and then had them sort of work on those, and then through that learned, okay, what's really possible. Because it's one thing to really see a YouTube video and play around with it and do like a hello world concept, but then actually working on something which solves a problem that you have, right? And then you quickly realize, okay, there are some challenges and bottlenecks that you run across. And but as way of that, so we looked at some use cases: marketing, content generation, looking at how do we even handle sort of sales inquiries, teach it certain domain domain inputs, give it domain inputs, and then see how it responds. So, and then even then, that sort of was a mini project short. 1-2 weeks. You can't really have these specialized freelancers on your roles for a long time. And then we internally tried to give mini projects to people, but then we found that also didn't really do justice, because you need to be a little bit more involved, because you can't do your existing work and they'll end up doing just watching YouTube videos, and it ends up with what I was doing. I have my full-time job. I can't just keep learning all the time. So now we came across, okay, let's see if we can do a combination, and we hired a bunch of interns. So we started an AI fellowship at Qualitas, and then we said, you come on board. It's going to be focused on AI, Gen AI, and it's an internship, but a little bit at a higher level, where we actually give you more training, coaching, work on real world problems, and then of course we'll also pay you as a fellow. And so that turned out to be pretty successful. So it's been 1 month, a little over a month, and it's in a 6-month program. And we found the kids to be really productive, and we've cracked some tough problems. I've learned a lot through that process. That was the whole intent, right? And but we're also seeing how we can use some of the tools available to solve some problems and enhance productivity. So I'm starting to see early success from this program, and so I think now I'm looking to see how do I take it maybe to the next level, and then maybe instead of working with interns, work with um, either freelancers or build a small team or work with others, and love to sort of also explore what 100x engineers and its cohort can also do. But yeah, that's kind of how our journey has been. But so and every step of the journey has gotten me nothing but more excited about the possibilities, right? And I think there are so many different success stories out there, which is unbelievable. And I think whoever is in the cohort right now, you guys did a fantastic job by joining and getting in early, because I think we are just at the start of something really, really big.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like mentioning this in the one of the lecture. I think there's like a inflection point which we are about to see. Like this is one of the biggest inflection point of the decade, right? Which is like last time I think we saw some boom when the internet .com bubble happened, right? But yeah, the same kind of cycle. I think some people are suggesting that it could be like a bigger than the internet.
Oh yeah, there's electricity, there's internet, and then there's Gen AI, and it's going to eat internet and electricity for breakfast.
So like again, like so this was a discussion like we were having also in the cohort, as you mentioned, like you started your fellowship program, right? So we are also like something doing similar. So we basically like taking like some problem statements from entrepreneurs in the industry and then converting that into capstone projects. So people can maybe take some inspiration from those projects, can actually build and work on that, and like then maybe show some proof of concepts. So that's also like one of basically our idea of like how people can learn these skills, because everybody, as like from our experiences, like learning as what you mentioned, right? Like people want to basically experiment first in the space before actually like putting their money into the, you can say, solution, right? So like yeah, if we can discuss like some of the problem statements which you maybe can share with the community, and maybe we can have like a more detailed discussion. If somebody like has any questions, you can post it in the chat. So but yeah, like if you can share some problem statements.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think the whole power of Gen AI is enhanced when it merges with a domain knowledge, right? So if you take Gen AI by itself, it doesn't intelligence by itself is nothing but the ability to interpret text, right? LLMs are nothing but text interpreters at the end of the day. But the real power comes in when you merge that with some certain hard knowledge, which is domain, which is facts, right? So some data along with cognitive skills is the domain. So if you look at if you sort of combine the two, then you can then sort of just let your imagination run wild. And so in our case, for instance, we've been looking at Gen AI and in the domain of manufacturing, and more specifically in industrial automation. So, and we look at it to say, okay, what skills or what bottlenecks can we sort of alleviate? Either bring down the skill competence level to do a certain job, or increase the productivity of a certain function by sort of infusing Gen AI, right? So those are the two different buckets of problems and use cases that we're looking at. So as an example of the first one, right? So if you were, for instance, an industrial automation consultant, now what we do is what we call our business analysts. They go to factories and they try to understand, a little bit about their processes, what is their manufacturing quality control processes and systems, and then look at where would computer vision really add value and where would it sort of make a difference. And a lot of times it's a combination of the technology feasibility, the commercial feasibility, as well as the practical feasibility to implement something. And so all those three have to be evaluated before we assess a fit. And that requires a pretty strong industrial and domain knowledge to be able to qualify a requirement, right? And so what if we thought a large language model or a specialist model and, a lot of these domains, and then it assists you in asking the right questions. So it's a sales enabled chatbot, but which is on the feed, right? Because we realized that, we had a lot of training and experience that went into a successful analyst, for instance, and someone who wasn't. It was just experience and training. So this is where it's an example of bringing down the skill level of someone to do a job successfully with the help of AI. The other one where you take one function and really enhance it and make them produce the output of 2 or 3 engineers is when also in marketing, for instance. So what happened is just by way of attrition, all my marketing team sort of left right after COVID. And that's when, we took up the challenge to say, can we use Gen AI to say, hey, do we really need to hire a marketing team? And, and that challenge sort of forced us to find innovative solutions. And so, we had an intern who just coordinated things, but then we used tools to right from content generation to creating video editing to do things with SEO, to provide ad copies. We use Gen AI, and that turned out we're getting more leads than ever. So we can't catch up. Now we have a sales problem because we're getting a lot of leads, but our conversion cycles are long. So it's taking. So we're trying to now address that with using Gen AI as well. So I think those are some of the few use cases. There's so many more, right? How can we apply that in product? Can you using natural language build a solution to say, let's say you're inspecting a shirt, you want to check if the logo is present, the buttons are present wherever you are, and so you just feed it an image, and you, using natural language, you describe what you really want your inspection task to do, and then in the background it creates a model architecture to say, hey, we need to use an object detection model for the buttons, an object detection model, and it creates like this script, right, instead of you having to develop all that. So those are much more advanced use cases compared to these. So from here to there, there's a rainbow of different use cases that we would love to sort of explore and look at.
And I feel like sales is like a very, you could say right problem where like AI agents can actually deliver a lot of value. And as you mentioned, you're already using some kind of agent, but that is like hosted on GPTs. So like, do you have any plans for that? Or are you exploring this area?
Yeah, I am. In fact, last week before I went on vacation, I wanted to try my hand at in the Microsoft AutoGen platform, right? And then this Crew AI, this Baby AGI, there's tons of these, and I was very excited at that because so one of the things that I tried was we had a problem with HubSpot data. So there's a lot of these old school businesses, especially if you're more than 5 years, you have a large amount of CRM data, and they're not really up to date. They may not be valid. They don't enter things correctly. So I wanted to build an agent framework where one agent has a skill to go and get information from our CRM, another agent that goes and searches the web for the LinkedIn information, their current data, and then a third agent that monitors, creates content in a personalized way, and then a third one that kind of reviews it, right? So 4 agents that sort of work together and orchestrates this workflow. Okay. So it was just an idea, but when I was playing around with it, I realized that there are some tricks that you need to overcome. But that's just one use case. But I can think of so many. It's exponential when you put 2 GPTs together, right? Or 2 agents together, and teach them the skills with APIs, which is nothing but APIs to access data. And that whole combination is so powerful, right? And so very exciting to explore. So we're looking at it, but very early stage, not.
So I think that can be like a very good problem statement for capstone project for students, right? Even like I started like automating some part of my work. So I basically like when I was like expanding the consultancy wing and as well as like 100x team. So I was like hiring a lot of people. But the problem is like right now because of the job market, right? I posted a job opening, and within 3 hours, like I got more than 1,000 applications.
Oh my God.
And I was like, sorry, I can't review all these things and like in just like because I have limited time and bandwidth. So I thought like let's automate this process first. So we internally, like I sat with my team and we built like a simple AI agent, which basically goes to all the LinkedIn resumes which you receive. And then based on what's your requirement is, like we have posted all the requirements, like I'm looking for like a junior guy who has like 0 to 1 year experience, should mention these keywords in the resume and have this. So this is the basic level of check, right? The screening, which usually my HR guy, junior HR guy used to do. So we try to basically automate that process, and it came out very well. So we basically like simply use Assistant API, which is from GPT, like the GPTs you are using, APIs version of that. And we basically like feed in our information. Okay, this is our job description. These are the things which we are looking for, and then it can basically run like doesn't matter like because it doesn't need to like stop, right? So whenever a new application comes in, it'll automatically detects it, screens it. If it's basically like it matches the criteria, it'll just send me an email. Okay, this guy applied with these things. It basically matches your criteria. So that was like the initial part, and then we basically like went one step ahead also. So that was one project I demoed in the cohort where like so there's a Versal project, open source completely, which will take your first round of interview. So it's an AI agent which will basically like an AI avatar. It will ask you a bunch of questions which you can select as a screening round question, like what's your experience and basic things like that. So this AI agent basically
chat-based or voice?
It's a voice-based.
Voice-based, okay.
Yeah, so it's a voice-based.
So using like a Whisper API or something
too. It's a Whisper API, so you can then like speak your answer.
Wow.
It will convert your voice into text, and then it will basically again use the same checklist, and then like send a detailed summary to me as a recruiter, and then I can basically have like a full view without even me like taking any interview.
Oh, amazing. So you can judge communication skills, how they speak, what are the questions.
Exactly, and it can basically and GPT is very good at that. By the way, like if you do a conversation with GPT and ask a feedback about how did you perform, it gives you very good basically feedback. Right? As long as you just mention, okay, these are the criteria I'm looking forward for.
Amazing.
And that helped me a lot, and I was able to like screen, like say, a lot of candidates out of say, thousands of applications.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that is like one thing which I thought, okay, maybe I'll share with the students as well. So we made like that into a project. So
that's so cool. I would love to see that. I mean, I think everyone has that problem, right?
Yeah, hiring is also like very common problem.
Oh, absolutely. And especially in a country like India, where now there's talent, that's where we are rich at, right? And so you will find, the screening problem as something that you would want to. Every company would go through that. I would.
Sure.
Look at that.
We can use the same technology in prospecting as well. Prospecting is basically safe stuff, like where you like filter your potential customers, right, based on the criteria. So maybe the same tech can be used there as well. So,
absolutely, I can see that happening because there's a lot of back and we're using a chat-based interface, but then converting to voice or telecall, right? So you get a number. We use Exertel when we come in. We can feed that to an API, and they can reply back just like any other. You've seen the original Google demo where that restaurant owner, Google Voice was, but oh wow, I would love to. And I think the potential you're on to, when we spoke earlier, I really found your story fascinating, how you've kind of taken, because even I was scouting for different people. So like I said, I'm only looking for avenues to learn from other either freelancers, engineers, companies, and I think you really stood out because you kind of the way you explained things. And so I saw some of your videos where you had this video of this AI engineer, right? Code. And I think that really was well put out. And so that I think so. You're really kind of structured this combination of capstone projects, things that you try out on your own, and using theoretical inputs based on you're talking about having a researcher in your team looking at various tools. So I think you really kind of put that. So really, congrats, kudos to that, and I'm sure there's the feedback you're getting also aligns with that.
So like actually like started from our own problem statement, because so when we are doing the consultancy, we are like, okay, this is going to be very difficult to find talent in this space. And I am not able to get any, you can say, a boot camp per se or any university, because initially I hired a lot of ML engineers, but I realized they are not very good at building full stack solutions, because they are like, okay, I know algorithms, I'm going to write exactly like this.
Yeah.
And they just give you like the model output. I was like, no, this is not how I supposed you to like complete the task.
I know.
And I realized like, okay, this is a very different skill somebody like needs to acquire, and it has to be like a more full stack engineer, right? Who can understand the requirement, use the tools which are existing in the market, instead of a lot of ML engineers,
Try to build their own model.
Try to build their own model, which is like completely, to be honest, like waste of time. Like if it's a model out there and can just basically open source and solve your problem, why to basically go and rebuild the wheel?
Reinvent, yeah. So, I completely I hear what you're saying. I mean, we have the problem as well. And I think a lot of it is just a mindset, right? So I think we've been taught in schools and colleges that unless you're doing something hard, and you're not really doing work, right? And so, and that needs to change, because it's not about solving a hard problem by reinventing the wheel or tuning a model, but it's really about how it's the point of least friction, finding the least friction to solve your problem, and that is really engineering. And so I think you're absolutely right. And so it's interesting. So you had a problem that you were facing and said you couldn't find the talent. Then you said, okay, let me train people, and then that turned out to be a business of its own. Fantastic. I love that story.
You have started working on computer vision way before, when it was like cool, right, in India and like anywhere. So what do you think about, like, if somebody wants to start their career in this space, like wants to build something in with using computer vision as a technology, what are things they can like do or look forward for, and what basic like checklist you can say they can follow?
That's great question. I see quite a lot in terms of computer. They get attracted towards the computer vision part of it, right? And so, which is great. But if you look at it, computer vision at its core is probably, today has been solved to a large extent. Like, for instance, when we had to solve a hard OCR problem, we trained our own OCR tools using object detection. But today you have so many pre-trained OCR models. You don't need to use those things. Similar to that, if you look at computer vision as something that you want to start a career in, look at, domain is really number one, right? Pick a domain, pick a problem. Let's say industrial. And I would, if I were to redo this, I would go very deep into just automotive or something in 3D, which we're now slowly starting to niche down on. And then look at what you called, I like your term, full stack solutions, right? So don't look at training models, just look at how can you use this. And you start to realize that, at least in our world, the computer vision part is really not the hard part. It's how do we integrate it with machines? How do we make it run 24/7? How does it handle certifications? And so those are a large part of what your USP will come out to be. So as an entrepreneur, take a small use case, but then quickly build sort of the moat around that domain. And I think any domain you can pick has a number of use cases that you can go after.
How do you think about like the job market, especially like now, as we all know, like what's happening, like a lot of layoffs happening right now in the industry. So what's basically your opinion on that, first of all, and like how do you basically suggest somebody who are preparing for jobs right now?
Yeah. That's also a good question. We think about that a lot. So, like, I'll tell you, from what we are experiencing in our company and in my circle of people that I interact with, and then probably my opinion, right, of the macro view. When it comes to our circle, and we've been very conservative, right? So, like, take the marketing example that I gave you. When people left, the first question we really asked, the question really hard, as do we really have to hire? And only if we were 110% sure did we actually open up a requisition. But otherwise, we tried with a freelancer, because the tech is evolving, skills are evolving, and we really don't know how somebody who is filling a role today is going to be tomorrow, right? And so we're being much more conservative than we were before, even though we can probably, hire if we want to. So I think the same is with others as well, right? That I'm looking at. In the macro world, I think people are, what is happening is they're starting to realize that they probably overhired quite a lot when it came to the pro. There was sort of this FOMO that happened, post COVID.
ZERP era, like zero interest period, right?
Yeah, money was cheap. You could hire people where the venture capitalists were on a FOMO mode. It's like they didn't want to miss out. So they started funding things, and then they started to demand that to be spent. And so I think they're starting to realize, oh, wait a minute, that's a lot of overhiring they did. And so they're now scaling back, right? And so I think that's going to happen a little bit more. But I think the other side of the equation is that this gig economy and what you can actually do as a solopreneur or even as a small team, and the number of startups that you can create is now mushrooming, right? Yeah. And so it's no better time to be sort of an entrepreneur in AI than today. And people are hungry because they don't want to hire, but they'll hire an agency or they'll hire you as a consultant. And I can see a lot of people who my friends got laid off. I'm in a cohort which is now sort of middle-aged, right? So much more senior than a lot of the cohort that you are training. But they are happy to sort of take a step back and sort of get into consulting or do things on their own rather than looking at a job. So they would hire, freelancers and consultants rather than full-time, I think. And there's a lot of demand.
That's a good insight, actually. Like the demand for these gig economy, like actually is rising because of people being more conservative, right? And they don't want to take too much risk before experimenting or like before like seeing some results and outputs, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's like a very good way also like to put it across the community. Like you don't need to prepare for like a say job right now, but if you can use your skills to like get a freelance project, maybe from you as well, right? You can basically like put out a problem statement, and maybe like people can like say pick out and send you their assignments or solutions, and if you like them, maybe you can potentially work with them, right?
Absolutely.
So that's like a good way to actually, because a lot of people goes into that rabbit hole of preparing for interviews, and then like spending their entire time. I've seen a lot of engineers doing the DSA preparation and then realizing, okay, this is not exactly what I do on a day-to-day basis of my job. So that they miss a bigger picture there. So I think that's, for me, it's very interesting because it opens up a new way of like applying to jobs and like getting opportunities.
Yeah, no. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. And someone, as young as you, who's I think you, did you do a full-time job initially? You did initially, but a very short time.
But 6 months.
Yeah, something like that. And then after that, you've been on your own. And so you've been, doing really well. But I think, I always think about, see, people go to jobs because like these traditional jobs, because they want stability and they want an income, right? They have their steady income that comes in and they want stability. It's basically money, right? And so, but I think in today's world, the skills compound faster than money, right? So, and you have to pick the avenue, especially when you're in your early 20s, late 20s, early 30s, doesn't matter. Even up to 40, doesn't matter unless you have, large commitments. Choose opportunities which enhance a skill. Things like this, right? I'm here today to learn, to be honest, right? So I reached out to you when I wanted to learn more about you. I knew that you were doing a great job in teaching, and if you can teach, then you're learning as well, right? So so avenues that really teaches you, helps you develop skills, the right skills, gives you exposure to an environment and an ecosystem that connects you with other. And I think that's would be, in my opinion, far greater than a stable job.
Cool. I think this was awesome to talk to you. Like a lot of great insights. So yeah, like thanks for taking time out. And yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Siddhant. Thanks for people staying patiently listening. And so Keep up the good work. I think you guys are onto something really big. I think 4 or 5 years down the road, we're going to reflect back and say, wow, the world is going to look very different when it comes to, automation and tech and everything else. So kudos again to what you've built, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.